Hi, everybody. This is GM John Fedorowicz for the 2000 Sinquefield Cup recap show. It's been a long day at chess. It's almost 9 o'clock on the East Coast, and it's still 1,000 degrees outside New York City. But I'm happy to be inside, and even though it's a long day at chess, it's been a lot of fun. My simul took 2 hours. I did it early in the afternoon, and since then I've been watching the Sinquefield Cup, which had some long games today. But first, we'll start off with Anand Topalov. Anand and Topalov, and when to the round contenders, they both had 4 points out of seven, so a +1 score. There have been complaints that there's been just too many draws in this tournament, and I don't think it's for lack of fighting. I just think these guys are good and they don't like losing. So, but today there were a couple of long fights, and I thought that, well, when I saw the pairing Wesley So White against Caruana, and Wesley So is in first by half a point, I was pretty sure that game was going to be a fairly solid draw for White, with Wesley hanging on to his half-point lead going into the last round. So, but we'll discuss tomorrow's pairings later. Let's see some of these games. All right, so Anand Topalov, and Topalov is in a decent position. He's having a pretty good tournament. After his draw with Anand in this game, they were both on 4.5, with Wesley So on 5, and also Aronian on 4.5 also. So tomorrow could be an exciting round with some of the contenders playing each other. So I always feel bad when I see Topalov play double E pawn. The guy's such a good Najdorf player that I'm always happy when he plays the Najdorf. But in this kind of tournament, I guess everybody plays the Berlin defense. So we have the Berlin defense. Also, Fabiano Caruana played a Berlin defense against Wesley So today, and Wesley So opted for the super solid rook to E1, and then knight takes E5, and that leads to a very, very equal position. So Anand mixes up with D5. Over the years, Anand has done pretty well playing against the Berlin defense. So takes, trades, early trade of queens, and we've seen this a lot over the past, I don't know how many years, 5, maybe 7 years. And, well, I mean, even before that, whatever year Kramnik used it to win the world championship match against Kasparov, that would be, in around 2003 or thereabouts, I think. So Berlin defense is very popular. It does what it's supposed to do. It makes draws with the black pieces. Allows you to play the next day with white and do some serious fighting. King E8, normal move, gets out of the way, rook D1 check, and black just develops. Bishop to B4, threatening bishop C takes C3. There was a very interesting game yesterday where Nakamura had black against Vachier-Lagrave, and he ruined Vachier-Lagrave's structure, but Vachier-Lagrave got very active with his king and his bishop and his rook, and also with his kingside pawns. So bishop takes C3 is a bit of a threat there, and I like Anand's play here, knight to E2, almost getting out of the way. Bishop to B7, and he plays knight to D4. And, of course, the king's moved already, so no castle and queenside. And we get knight takes knight, and bishop C5. Already here, a threat to make dead equality would be bishop takes, rook takes, and C5. And with the bishop opposite color position, I would think that would be a pretty easy draw, although it could even turn out better for black, because black's king could cruise up to E6, where it's pretty safe. And there could be good activity for black in that kind of position. So Anand plays knight to F5. And now I saw the computer was recommending bishop to F8, and which is a strange move. But Topalov does okay here. Rook to G8. And sometimes in these Berlin defenses, you see black making some weird-looking rook moves. G4 and H5 undermining. If pawn takes pawn, I believe we would see bishop to C8 and bishop to E3 and G6. And Anand goes for a very sharp continuation here. Of course, bishop takes bishop, pawn takes F5. Black's breaking through on the G file, so that could be good. So Vichy cements his knight into H6. Now, If rook takes, I think white can be better here, actually, much better after something like this, and black has serious trouble here unraveling. Um, pawn takes pawn takes pawn, c5 threatening mate, and then f4, and I think that black's king is always tied up here. White can win some pawns, but that's a dangerous situation. It could just be a doubling rooks on the d file. So good to avoid that. And so Topolov played pawn takes. Originally, when my simul ended and I looked at this position, I thought, man, that is one disgusting pawn structure. But then I saw the pawn structure. I had to look further, and I saw that this knight is kind of trapped. So I figured we're in the typical Berlin defense where it just stays equal the whole time. So g5, bishop back to c8, threaten the pawn. Of course, it was a logical move to return the bishop to a diagonal where it was playing the game. Anand plays f4, protecting everybody, and now rook to f1. And what Anand is trying to do is to crack with f5. It would be a very strange position if all the rooks got traded. Maybe with this knight here, perhaps it could even turn out better for black. So rook to d8, just c3, bishop h3, and rook f2, and king e6. So now he's stopping f5, and he's playing against this knight. If white wasn't careful here, this could turn out to be a really good position for black. Double pawns, triple pawns and all. Sorry. Okay, now white's cruising around trying to capture pawns, but black's getting very active here. And now Vichy plays f5, which pretty much forces a drawn position. Rook takes a7 is a very dangerous thing to do here because there could be some attacks here, with things like bishop to g4. So he played f5 check, rook f4. He's going to take here. And I thought at some point around here, Vichy was doing something. Vichy tries to this and then moves the king. And here, rook e2. He has his h-pawn. I thought there might be some position where he can bother him. Rook to b1 and h5. And rook to d1 and king takes g3. And I thought here that maybe he could try to get some advantage with h6. And then I was looking at some position like rook to g1, and then rook to g2, and then and then something like rook to d1, and then rook on f to f2. There's weird threats here of checks all over the place and putting the rook behind the pawn, and sometimes king e5. So rook on f to f2, and then rook h5. And rook h2, and he sacks the pawn to keep this. But I don't know. I guess Vichy felt that this was just too active. Rook d3, and then he'll go rook to d8 and stop the pawn. And there could be some positions where this pawn gets surrounded and black's taking e5. So I guess Vichy decided not to risk it and just went for a solid draw. Rook c4, rook back, takes, and they agreed to a draw here. Normal lines here would be something like king to e6, and then rook f6 check, and you could tell that with the triple pawns, black is actually in any shape to try to win. White's king will cross over and keep an eye on his pawns. So what's the Berlin defense designed to do? Well, it did what it was supposed to do. Topolov made a draw with black, and now he'll see what he could do tomorrow. He'll have the white pieces against Aronian, but we'll talk more about that later. So let's go on to our second game. So our second game of the Sinquefield recap of round 8 is Geary against Schvidler, and this was a very exciting long game, and it was between the tail enders, unfortunately for them. Schvidler coming into this tournament round had 2 points out of 7. For him, terrible, -3. And Geary had 3 points out of 7. Not very good for him either. So let's see what happens here. Geary had white, and Geary plays d4, and we get into a Grunfeld, a neo-Grunfeld, which Schvidler is a specialist of. This is one of the most solid variations for black in these. Black just wants to go d5 and have the option of taking back with a pawn. Then the pawn structure becomes kind of like a exchange Slav, which we know is pretty solid. Knight f3, and both players come out, and queen to b3. Pawn takes pawn is another move here. Queen to b3 is a nice move, and the idea is just to protect the pawn and recapture with the queen and hope to get control of the center later. You'll also see these kinds of replies in some Slav positions where white can go queen c2 or queen to b3 and protect the pawn like that. So Schwidler castles, both sides castle, and d takes c4. Another way for black to play here would be queen b6, and it's very solid for black. Sometimes white can get a slight edge, but it's a pretty good move. Also, queen to b6. And my friend, the late American Polish grandmaster Alex Wojciech, used to get into these kinds of positions and would play great. So if you want to look up how to play these Catalan type positions versus Slavs, take a look at his game. Somehow he would always take his time, but he'd manage to get control of the center. And also, hardly ever lost with the white pieces in those positions. So knight h4 from Geary. Normal kind of procedure could be something like this, and then black has to see is knight e4 the right move here. Black also has knight b6, but then white can retreat with queen b3 and have a4 ideas. So it's a position where black has to be a little careful here. Otherwise, it could just turn into a nice space advantage for white. So after here, knight h4, knight b6, and bishop to g4. A typical move here, trying to provoke something. F3 is not a move that white would want to have in this kind of position. So knight c3 protects the pawn, and Schwidler plays knight to d5. If knight takes d5, he'll recapture with the pawn, and looks pretty solid. He'd have an attack on this square then, and that looks to be about equal. Geary retreats. Well, if Geary retreat, then I don't think his maneuver of knight to h4 was very good then, because he's losing a little bit of time here, but he still wants to get e4 in. Schwidler captures, very Grunfeld kind of idea, and now queen to d5. Stopping pawn to e4 ideas, and offering a trade of queens in the right situation, and also sometimes using the c square. If Schwidler's bishop, if Geary's bishop, Schwidler's bishop on g4 wasn't somewhere else here, there might be some sort of knight d2 idea. I remember I had a game in a U.S. Open against Joel Banawa where I had this kind of structure for white and won a pretty good game. People, you can look that up and see. So bishop a3 is the normal move. Rook e8, regular reply, just protect him, and knight to e5. Queen takes, and now this is a pawn. I'm not really sure I understood what was going on here. I see that this bishop is not in good shape here and goes back, but Schwidler winds up a pawn here after this, and white has some compensation in the bishop pair, but I don't think it's enough compensation for white to achieve any kind of winning position. I think this is the kind of compensation where white is just playing for a draw. So c4 was a decent move, boxing the knight out, and a5. And Schwidler was always bothering him with this move in the right position. So rook a6 is a good move to protect this pawn. I thought Schwidler played this part of the game very well, holding the position and just keeping his extra pawn. And nice move here. He had to double. That was the best way to protect the pawn. The only way, really, because you can't go b6 because then c6 would be hanging. So f4. And now you can see that Geary is just sort of playing moves here. His compensation is not very clear. And I don't think going to a bishop opposite colors here with the rook takes with this kind of threat would be good. And I think that black is just better here. Not an easy win by any means, but still, what is white doing? So Schwidler just takes his time. And as another opportunity for the bishop opposite colors, but with these pawns on white, I don't think that would be very good for white as far as drawing chances go. So I think Schindler plays this part of the game very well, and Geary can only just play some moves and hope. Rook here. Now, this move at the right moment could be good. Also, combined with knight d6, keeping an eye on this one. One thing is if black plays a4 in the wrong position and we get a position with takes, rook to b1, rook a6, that could wind up in a position where black's pieces are very passively placed, and Geary might have some drawing chances there. So he just hangs out. He's trying to get some counterplay, kind of thrashing around really because nothing much to do. I was watching this game and I didn't see any spot around here where Geary had anything better than what he did. And I thought that Schwidler played very well here. And now maybe f5 was incorrect. It could be some sort of chance for maybe rook here and rook here. That might have been a chance. After f5, I think the position is just lost now. And this was a very good move, of course, with a double attack. And Geary plays this, and Schwidler plays rook check first because he wants to take on f5. If taking on f5, of course, would lose the knight to rook f6 check. And now knight takes f5. So Schwidler has emerged up two clear pawns. They're broken, and his king is cut off, but I think it should be a fairly easy win with somebody as strong as Schwidler. So he brings everything back, check, forces the king back. And now this was a nice move here. The bishop's almost trapped. Rook here, knight takes, I think would be a very easy win in the rook ending. So king up was forced, and now Schwidler plays very well here. Just protects, knight f4, knight d5, good move. Box stops check, stops the rook from getting behind the pawn, and then c4. Now he's going to get c3 soon, and his pawns are running up the board. And now Geary, I guess, just did not feel like going bishop c1 here. It wasn't going to be too beautiful anyway. On bishop c1, rook a2 could be a good idea, or maybe we swing the rook over to g4 and then slowly push the pawn, e-pawn, get the king to d4 and make progress like that. So check here, and now Geary gets tricky for one move, king here, but Schwidler transposes into a winning rook ending with rook to d1. White's king is cut. The pawn is coming up, and this is an easy win. There could be a position where if White's rook was on h2, it could be one of those front draws where you would go rook e2, and I don't think so because I think the pawn is up, and then let's say king f5 check, and then the king would come here, and that would be a win. So I think that even if White's rook was in another position, this would be a pretty easy win. Geary kept playing, but it's just no hope here. e2 threatening to win the rook. Rook back. This is a forced move, and now the king comes up. Geary played a little bit more, and it's hopeless. It's this position, the Lucena position with the king coming here and the rook check. So let's say White did some checks. This is the kind of position we get, and now Black's going to go here, and then they call it what we call building a bridge. Let's say the checks were stopped and king here, and he just hung out, and then he hung out some more, and this would be the bridge. King here on the next move, and with a very simple win. So a pretty good game by Schwidler. I didn't really understand Geary's opening. That pawn sacrifice, pretty much Geary was not playing for a win with that pawn sacrifice. So Geary's been in some bad form for a while now, and I don't know what he should do. Maybe sometimes the best thing to do is take some time off. These guys play in a lot of tournaments, and Geary has had a lot of poor results lately. So he's got to figure out maybe a little bit of rest is something he should think about. So that was a good battle between the two tail enders. That allows Schwidler to join Geary, and they're on 3 points each now. Geary, going into the round, had a point lead on Schwidler, but that doesn't exist anymore. So they both have 3 points. And now we'll go into our last game, and that will be Aroni and Nakamura. So now we'll be going to our final game, Ronian against Nakamura. And I sometimes when I see Nakamura playing black against Aronian, I'm just reminded that he seems to have trouble finding a solid opening to play against him. But today's game, Nakamura's opening seemed to be fine. I thought he was on the verge of a very easy equality, and then at some point he drifts and then gets ground down in a very long ending where Aronian just showed Super Grandmaster nice technique. So we get going here with a classical Queen's Gambit. Turns into that. Of course, there's Bogo Indians with Bishop to B4 check and Queen's Indian with B6, but Nakamura decides just to go for a regular Queen's Indian. Now the normal moves here are Bishop to G5 and Bishop to F4. Bishop to G5, you might get the Tartakover, which would go like this, which I think has always been a good opening. If you look up the people that have played this stuff, Karpov championship matches, Tal, Fish, Spassky, you name it, Kasparov, all have played this Tartakover. Nakamura has played this against Aronian also and achieved a solid position, but I think Aronian beat him in that. And so if you look up Nakamura's score lately against Aronian when he's playing the black piece, is not very good. So, but Nakamura in this game gets a nice opening. I always thought C5 was the best move. We saw B6, maybe in the famous game where Anand beat Magnus Carlsen the last World Championship match. B6 I don't really like with this, with the pressure on C7. In my opinion, C5 is the best way to try to equalize. And usually in this position, you see pawn takes pawn, giving an isolated pawn, and then knight takes, and I think black is just about equal there. Nakamura had a game in his last tournament, I forgot who it was, where he recaptured on with a pawn. I think it was against Geary, actually, and white actually started getting some pressure there. So bishop 3, pawn takes, pawn's equal. Now, there were some games with queen takes, and a6, and if anything, white would have a slight advantage here, but black looks extremely solid here. A6 looks good, bishop D3, knight C6. Here, knight to B4. Queen E7 is an interesting move. Also, if black wants to do this thing with B5, maybe black is best setting up with a knight on D7. If B5 here, there could be some rook C1 idea with a lot of action on the C file. So I thought maybe knight C6 is a little bit inaccurate. Knight B4, he goes back, and now we have the trade of queens, and he uses knight D5. So I think that black is coming out in good shape, and on bishop to E4, this is where Nakamura is faced with a decision. Should he do knight F6 like he did in the game, or should he go for something like this and just develop here and come here and try and trade some rooks? Well, I'm sorry, I meant to go rook A7 first, and then B6, of course. Don't want to hang that rook. And then is it interesting to play this move? But what's happening with just F6 here? I mean, takes, and B5. And it seems to me that this type of bishop opposite colors, I think it should just be a draw. So that's an important decision that Nakamura had to think about, and I think I would have gone for knight takes F4. Knight E2, back, rook E8, and bishop to F3. Another decision here. Should Nakamura have taken this bishop? He's probably afraid of some, good knight versus bad bishop position. Maybe something like this could be some pressure. Keeping an eye on the bishop, keeping an eye on this pawn, maybe takes and rook to D7, although I feel like black should be okay there. So that's another decision that Nakamura had to think about. So now he goes E4. His problem here is dealing with this strong bishop on his diagonal. And the way he deals with it is he gets his rook out of the way, and rook here, and then B6. A6 is good. And I don't know. I'm wondering if maybe A5 should have been played, but he might be worried about knight B3 and then rook to C6 or rook to D6 maybe, and pressure on this pawn. I feel like white is getting some pressure now. Knight C4 hitting this pawn, and forcing e4 so that now this bishop is alive. And now later on, this pawn could be a problem. I feel here that white has become better again. And now it seems to me very hard equality here. Black's going to have to be in something. Now, it's possible that bishop takes, rook a8 was a decent chance for black. But what's going on with this bishop opposite colors here? Maybe threatening to take some pawns. This could be a real target later. I feel that white is getting some pressure here. So king to f1, and Aronian is very good at these positions. He's got the bishop pair, and black can't really do anything. Bishop d6, good move, threatening to mess up black's pawns. Also, if takes, rook takes, hits this and this. So already you can see that Nakamura is getting into some trouble. He puts in bishop takes first, and I think he's just afraid here of his pawns getting broken. Maybe some rook to d6 here, and this knight's under control, so I think white would just have a free shot there at the pawns. And now it's just up a pawn, and we have to see if Nakamura can scrape up any compensation. I didn't really see a way to do it. He's trying to get active, but how active can he get? Because white's king is safe, certainly, and white's pawns are pretty solid, too. So it's just a question of what to do here. And a dangerous thing to do here is to go here and this. This rook can get up on the next move. So this is a dangerous situation here. If Nakamura could have snatched that pawn, he would have absolutely liked to have, of course, to restore the material equality, which he becomes a problem. This was a very solid thing that Aronian did with his queenside pawns, and that allows him for his rook to become active. And I like this move g4 here. G4 cements the pawn. Also, when Nakamura starts threatening to check, the king has a place to hide on g2. Very important. Otherwise, if Aronian was going to try to win, he was going to have to drop his f-pawn. So g4 is a very nice move. And rook takes a3, check, discovery, take back, threatening this pawn now. And rook check, and we see that the king now has a place to go. This pawn's threatened. And now f6, unfortunately for Nakamura, he has to do this because once he goes f6, then his king gets cut off. And then when the king gets cut off, this pawn is a little bit vulnerable for later on. Bishop check, offering a trade. If this pawn was back here, I don't know. Maybe there could be some blockade chances. With the fact that this pawn is on white, I think a rook trade is just lost. Check. Tricky moves here. Check. And now here, defending the pawn with the bishop, and you can see that black's king is cut. And at some moment, Nakamura is going to force his knight out of there, and he's going to get to take more stuff. Bishop c6, a fine move. I think really if Nakamura wanted to, he could resign now. Rook d7, the knight goes back, and now he's up 2 pawns. Notice that he can't take this because it just rook takes knight. And so it's a clear 2 pawns up. And Nakamura played on for a long time, but I think the rest doesn't need much comment. This move is an attempt to go into a rook ending, but unfortunately for black, there's passed pawns all over the place. And this is the simplest way to win. Just put this pawn on f7. Black's rook obviously cannot take this. That would be an easy king and pawn ending. And black's rook goes behind, but then white's king starts to run around, and black really can't do too much about it. So black's rook is staying here. White's king, in some cases, can run up here or even head for here. So f3, now the king comes back, and this is pretty easy. Now the king comes up. If the rook were to ever leave, let's say here the rook decides to go with check, then this wins easily. Takes, king up, rook back, pawn here, and the idea is just going to be check and win the rook. And if something like this, we'll do discovered check, king takes, and then check will make a queen, and that will be over also. So that's why it's that's what white is shooting for, and of course white gets it very easily. So Nakamura keeps trying, but it's pretty hopeless here. nothing much to do. And now finally we're going to get B7. He's going to win the rook. There's if pawn takes, let's say here, check. He would go king here, and then there's nothing much to do about this, and very easy win. So a nice game from Aronian. You could tell where Nakamura drifted a few times. No outright blunders, but a few inaccuracies that landed him in a very difficult to defend position. One thing to look at is was knight takes f4 a good way to just about equalize. That was something to think about. And also the position where he could have gone knight takes e4. Was that another one possibility for trying to equalize? The position after, I felt like the position with the bishop on f3 after he went e4, I felt like that e4 pawn was going to be a problem at some point later in the game, and it turned out that was true. Okay, let's figure out what's going on here. The last round is tomorrow. That should be a good round. This tournament's had a lot of draws, but we got to see. So Wesley So is going to be playing the black pieces against Vachier-Lagrave. Vachier-Lagrave's on 4 points. If he were to win the game, there is a possibility that there could be a huge tie on 5 points, because you have on 4.5. You have Anand and Topolov are both on 4.5. Wesley So's on 5. So there is some possibility there that it could be a lot of draws. Now, with some draws, there's a possibility we could have a lot of people on 5 points. So we have Nagamura is playing Ding Liren. Both of them, let's see, we have Nagamura will be on 3.5 going into the last round. And Ding Liren is on 4, so who knows? But Nakamura has the white pieces, so I would expect that Ding Liren is going to have a hard time winning that game. Vachier-Lagrave against So. Vachier-Lagrave with 4 points. I suppose he'll give it a shot against So, who would be happy with a draw. He's got the black pieces. If So made it to 5.5, I don't know if anybody's going to catch him. We'll see. Caruana against Geary. Fabiano, 4 points. Well, Geary's out of form. Fabiano's white. I could see white winning that game and getting up to 5 points. Schvidler and Ann. I don't know. Schvidler won the game today, tied for last place. I don't know. Does Anand take a shot? Maybe thinking Schvidler's in bad form. Not sure. If I'd have to predict, I would say that could be a draw. Topolov Aronian. Both players on 4.5. A winner there could find himself in clear first if Vachier-Lagrave beats Wesley So. So I think tomorrow shapes up to be an exciting day. I hope you guys enjoyed my recap of round 8. Hope to see you guys in a few weeks. The Olympiad is coming up in Baku. It's one of my favorite tournaments. I hope ICC covers it, and if they do, I hope to see you guys there. Also, my monthly simul was today. It was a nice simul, pretty solid play for a change, and I'll see everybody in September for my September simul. So, thank you very much, everybody. This has been the round 8 recap of the 2016 Sinquefield Cup. Enjoy tomorrow's coverage. It should be an exciting round. So far, as I've said a few times, there have been a lot of draws in this tournament, but these guys are pretty good players, so I don't believe in picking on people that strong for making draws. So enjoy tomorrow's coverage and enjoy our future events. This is GM John Fedorowicz from very hot New York City. Take care, buddy. Enjoy our tomorrow's recap and our future coverage. Bye, everybody. Have a good night or morning or whatever it is.